During the quiet middle portion of her overnight shift, Mara entered the citrus house by the familiar connecting path and closed the glass door behind her. Rain moved softly across the glass roof. It made a steady, even sound above the leaves, gentle enough to leave the room peaceful beneath it. Warm air held the clean scent of orange peel, damp soil, green branches, and old wood. She remained beside the door for a moment. The citrus house opened before her in a long, quiet line. Tubs stood beneath the spreading trees. Shelves followed the walls, with baskets resting beneath the leaves and their handles turned outward. Pale labels hung near the stems. The tiled walkway ran from the entrance to the farther glass door, where the connecting path continued toward the fig house. Mara let her eyes travel along that line. The entrance lamp cast a low circle across the tiles. Its shade was level, and its base stood clear of the nearest tub. The cord followed the wall without crossing the walkway. The light reached the first branches softly, leaving the leaves warm without making them bright. Mara stepped closer and touched the metal cover with the back of one finger. It was comfortably warm. She lowered her hand. The lamp was steady. From there, she could see the middle of the house. The work table rested beneath its shaded lamp, just as it had before. The white bowl with the green rim stood beside the light, clean and empty. The basket of unused labels rested near the table, and the folded cloth lay at one side. Beneath the work table, the small basket remained on its lower shelf beneath the cloth. Mara did not approach the basket. She only let the arrangement settle in her mind. Door, walkway, work table, farther lamp, connecting path. The house had a simple shape when she looked at it this way. The lamps, shelves, baskets, and branches all occupied their familiar places. She turned toward the middle lamp. The warmth grew a little stronger as she crossed the tiles. Citrus leaves formed quiet layers overhead. Their upper surfaces caught the light, while the spaces beneath them remained green and cool. Rain followed the roof above her, joining the small sound of her steps. At the work table, Mara paused at the edge of the lamp's glow. The shade directed its warmth downward across the wood. The cord remained clear of the table. The light reached the labels and the nearby leaves without shining directly onto the fruit. She touched the metal cover lightly. Again, it felt comfortably warm. The lamp had not shifted. Mara looked across the table without touching anything. The empty bowl stood safely in from the edge. The notebook rested beside it. The basket of labels remained gathered near the lamp. The folded cloth lay smooth and quiet at the side. The table held the familiar things she expected to see. Mara turned her attention to the farther end of the house. The third lamp marked the way toward the connecting path. Its light lay across the final tiles and reached the last citrus branches. The base stood outside the clear walking space. The nearest leaves had room around it. She walked toward the lamp. The path narrowed slightly between the tubs, though it remained open and easy beneath her shoes. Mara kept to the center, allowing the leaves to remain in their natural places. A few branches curved above her, and the pale labels hung quietly between them. At the farther lamp, she stopped. The shade sat level. The light fell evenly across the floor and the lower stems. Mara checked the metal cover with one finger. It held the same mild warmth as the lamps behind her. She followed the cord with her eyes. It rested along the wall and stayed away from the walkway. The third lamp was steady too. Beyond it, the glass door showed the connecting path. Lamps continued beneath the higher roof in a calm line toward the fig house. Rain blurred the garden outside into dark branches and pale reflections. The path itself was dry and familiar. Mara did not open the door. She knew the way already. The citrus house was warm around her, and this part of her shift began with seeing the room fully before returning to its ordinary work. She turned back along the walkway. From this direction, the house looked gently different. The farther lamp held the end of the path. The middle lamp gathered the work table into a small circle of amber. Behind her, the entrance lamp rested across the doorway tiles. 3 lights joined the room without making it bright. Mara walked slowly toward the nearest citrus row. One label near the third tub had turned slightly toward the trunk. Its writing could still be seen, but only from the side. Mara stopped beside the branch and lifted the small card between 2 fingers. She loosened the string. The leaves stayed where they were. Mara did not pull them aside or disturb the fruit. She brought the label around until its face met the walkway, then tied the string again with the same simple knot. The card swung once, then it settled. Mara stepped back onto the path. The writing was clear now, easy to read as she approached from either direction. That was enough. She left the branch untouched and continued toward the work table. The entrances and distances were familiar. The lamps were warm and steady. The label faced the path. The shelves, baskets, leaves, and table remained in their established places. At the middle of the house, Mara paused once more, this time without inspecting the lamp. She looked at the room as a whole. The entrance behind her held a little cooler air from the path. Around the work table, the warmth gathered close to the wood. Farther ahead, the third lamp guided the eye toward the glass door. The rain softened every edge, making the citrus house feel enclosed and peaceful. Mara placed one hand on the work table. The wood was smooth beneath her palm. A faint scent of orange peel rested in the warm air. The empty bowl caught a narrow green reflection along its rim. She left it there. Mara took a slow breath and listened. Rain moved over the roof. The lamps gave off a quiet, nearly hidden hum. A leaf shifted above her shoulder and came gently to rest. Beneath the table, the covered basket remained in its cooler shadow. The house no longer felt like somewhere she had just entered. Its shape had become clear again. The short path from the door to the table, the longer line toward the connecting passage, and the quiet spaces between the tubs. Mara lowered her hand. She did not cross to the fig house yet. The connecting path waited beyond the glass, dry beneath its higher roof, while the citrus house held her in its warm green light. The middle of the shift had its own unhurried pace. There was time to see, to check, and to leave each small thing in the right place before the next round began. Mara stood beside the shaded lamp. The corrected label faced the walkway. The 3 lamps kept their steady warmth. Rain continued softly beyond the glass. The citrus house was ready for the next ordinary round. Mara began at the work table beneath the shaded lamp. The white bowl with the green rim stood beside her notebook, clean and empty. Beneath the table, the small basket rested on its lower shelf beneath the folded cloth. 3 oranges lay inside, covered and undisturbed. Rain moved softly over the glass roof. Warm light gathered on the wood, the tiled walkway, and the lower citrus leaves. The air smelled of damp soil, clean peel, and the gentle warmth held by the shelves. Mara closed her notebook and took the pruning shears from their place beside the work area. The labels had been settled during her arrival. The baskets rested beneath their shelves, and the walkway was clear. She left everything as it was and turned toward the first row of citrus trees. A thin, dry twig showed beneath a cluster of leaves. Mara supported the living branch with one hand and placed the shears around the pale section. One quiet cut. The twig came away cleanly. She carried it to the small place kept for dry pieces, then returned to the row. The branch looked much the same as before, only with a little more space beneath its leaves. The fruit remained where it had grown. The warm lamp reached the green leaves without shining harshly across them. Mara moved on. The citrus trees stood in a gentle line along the walkway. Some leaves were narrow and bright, while others were broad and dark in the lower light. Here and there an orange showed through the green, round and still. At the next tree, a fine stem had dried near its tip. Mara followed it back to the living wood and removed only the finished part. She carried the cutting away before returning to the path. The third tree needed no pruning. Its leaves were open and balanced, with clear space around the fruit. Mara passed without touching it. At the following tub, a small brown leaf stem hung below the lower branches. She removed it with one careful cut and left the full green leaf in place. The walkway remained open beneath her feet. Mara continued toward the middle lamp, keeping an easy pace. Her work followed a simple rhythm. Notice the dry growth, support what was living, make one small cut, and carry the piece away. Near the middle of the house, she paused to check the lamp. Its shade was level, and its base stood clear of the tiles. Mara touched the metal cover with the back of one finger. It was comfortably warm. She lowered her hand without changing anything. The bowl remained beside the notebook. The covered basket remained beneath the table. The familiar arrangement held its place while Mara continued along the row. Near the farther end of the citrus house, a narrow branch held two dry shoots. She lifted the branch slightly and removed the shoots one at a time. The living leaves stayed where they were, making a soft green frame around the open space. Mara carried the small pieces away and returned to the path. Then she stood back. The dry growth that was plainly visible from this first angle had been removed. The citrus branches still held their natural shapes, and the healthy leaves and fruit remained undisturbed. The labels still faced the walkway. The baskets still rested beneath the shelves. Mara did not search for every possible cut. Some branches showed themselves clearly, while others remained layered beneath the leaves. A slower look later could reveal a small piece that was easier to see after the room had rested. For now, this first pass was enough. She walked toward the last lamp. Its base stood clear of the tiles, and its light reached the final citrus branches without glare. Mara passed beneath the warm circle and opened the glass door to the connecting path. The air became cooler. Rain traced the panes overhead in narrow, shining lines. Lamps rested at quiet intervals along the path, their reflections lying in pale bands across the floor. Behind Mara, the citrus scent remained bright for a few steps. Ahead, damp wood and fig leaves waited in deeper green air. She crossed at an easy pace. The path was familiar beneath her shoes. The shears rested lightly in her hand. Rain sounded a little broader beneath the higher roof, while the lamps joined one pool of warmth to the next. At the wider middle section, Mara paused. Water gathered along the glass frame and slipped downward. Beyond the panes, the garden had softened into dark branches and quiet reflections. The tiles were dry. The lamps were steady. Mara looked along the passage and found its clear line toward the fig house. Nothing needed adjusting there, she continued. Broad leaves appeared beyond the far doorway, layered in warm shadow. The nearest lamp cast a gentle glow across the lower branches and the shelf beneath them. Mara entered the fig house and began at the first tree. One slender twig had dried near its end. She held it close to the living wood and made a single cut. The piece settled into her waiting hand. She carried it to the established place for trimmings and returned to the row. The fig leaves were broad and soft-edged. They gathered the lamplight in quiet patches, while the spaces beneath them stayed cool and green. Mara moved between the tubs, looking only for dry growth and leaving the healthy branches alone. At the next tree, a brown tip rested against a stronger stem. She removed the tip and carried it away. The following tree needed nothing. Its leaves had room around one another, and the branch held its natural line. Mara passed without touching it. At the next row, a low shoot had dried where it curved toward the edge of the path. Mara supported the branch and shortened the shoot at its base. The cutting was small. She carried it away before returning to the walkway. The path remained clear. Rain sounded softer in the fig house, filtered through the wide leaves and the lower roof. Every so often, a leaf shifted in the warm air and came gently to rest. Mara allowed her pace to follow those small movements. At the farther lamp, she stopped to check the light. The shade rested level. The base stood clear of the walkway. Warmth reached the lower stems and the shelves without falling harshly across the fruit. Mara touched the metal cover lightly. It held the same comfortable warmth as the lamps in the citrus house. She lowered her hand and continued. Near the end of the fig row, a dry branchlet had caught among the leaves. Mara supported the living branch, eased the dry piece free, and carried it to the collection place with the other trimmings. She looked along the room from the path. The fig branches held their broad, quiet shapes. The labels remained where Mara had left them. The baskets stayed beneath the shelves. The lamps cast their small circles across the floor. The dry pieces that were easy to see during this first pass had been gathered away. Mara let her eyes move once more over the branches, but she did not force the room to give up every small detail at once. Another look could come later, with different light, and a little more rest in her eyes. She returned the shears to their usual place in the fig house. Then she began the walk back through the connecting path. Her hands rested loosely at her sides. She passed beneath the lamps one at a time, moving through the cooler air between the houses. The scent of fig leaves softened behind her. Damp wood remained beneath the rain. Ahead, the citrus house gathered itself in warmer light. Mara crossed the doorway. Orange peel returned gradually, followed by green leaves, warm soil, and the familiar smooth scent of the work table. She walked way through the citrus rows without stopping. The branches were quiet after their small cuts. The path was clear from one lamp to the next. At the work table, the white bowl with the green rim still stood beside the shaded lamp, clean and empty. Beneath the table, the small basket remained on its lower shelf beneath the folded cloth. The 3 oranges rested inside it, as before. Mara did not lift the cloth. She placed one hand on the work table. The wood was smooth and warm beneath her palm. Rain moved over the glass roof. Citrus leaves held their soft shine, and beyond the last row, the connecting path showed its calm line toward the fig house. The lamps were steady. The first visible dry pieces had been cleared. The living growth remained in place, with room for another quiet look later. Mara breathed in the clean scent of the room. The route had carried her from the citrus house to the fig house and back again. The initial pruning pass had been made in both rooms, gently and without disturbing what was living. She closed her notebook and left it beside the empty bowl. The bowl stayed empty. The covered basket stayed beneath the table. The lamps continued their quiet warmth. Rain moved above both houses, and the work rested in its proper places, ready for the next ordinary part of the night. Mara knelt beside the old fruit crate beneath the work table and drew it forward into the soft edge of the shaded lamp. Its boards were dark with age but clean, their edges softened by years of handling. A faded blue stamp showed on the front, and a small latch held the lid closed. On the lower shelf beside her, the established small basket rested beneath its folded cloth. 3 oranges lay inside. At the far end of the citrus house, the white bowl with the green rim stood empty beside the lamp. Mara lifted the crate's lid. Inside, she found a folded sheet of paper, a length of clean cloth, and 2 plain wooden dividers. The paper was written in a careful, practical hand. It was not a record of anything unusual. It was simply a guide to the fruit. Mara carried the sheet to the work table and opened it beneath the lamp. The instructions were brief. Fruit that was still firm, and green gold could remain together for a while. Fruit with warmer color on one side should be turned gently so that side could be seen. Fruit that had softened evenly belonged in the bowl near the shaded lamp. The guide suggested checking with the whole hand instead of pressing with one finger. It also advised leaving space around each piece so that air could move. Mara read the page twice. She had already been looking at the oranges by color and shape, but the old note gave the work a clearer order. It made the small differences easier to notice without making them important. The fruit did not need rescuing or correcting. It only needed to be placed according to the stage it had reached. Rain moved softly over the glass roof. Mara brought the small basket from beneath the work table and set it on the table. She lifted the folded cloth away and placed it beside the notebook. 3 oranges lay together in the basket, cool from the lower shelf, each one firm beneath the skin. She lifted the first with both hands. Its color had warmed evenly across the rounded surface, with only a narrow green-gold band near the stem. Mara turned it slowly, feeling its smooth weight settle into her palms. The orange was ready for the bowl. The second had a similar warmth. One side was a little brighter than the other, so Mara turned it as the guide advised and checked it again with her whole hand. It was firm, but its color had settled evenly enough to join the first. The third remained green-gold beneath the warmer edge of the lamp. It was solid and cool, with no softened place. Mara set it aside on the cloth. She carried the first orange to the far end of the citrus house. The tiled path was clear beneath her shoes. The lamps made quiet circles across the floor, and the citrus leaves held their soft shapes above her. Rain traced the roof in a fine, woven pattern. At the bowl, Mara placed the orange near the center, leaving room around it. Then she returned for the second. The bowl's white ceramic caught a little of the shaded light. Its green rim made a calm line around the empty space. Mara placed the second orange beside the first, with a small gap between them. Their skins were not exactly the same color, but they belonged together in the gentler warmth. Mara walked back to the work table. The third orange waited on the folded cloth beside the basket. She checked it once more with both hands. It remained firm and pale near the stem. The guide had not asked her to move fruit simply for the sake of movement, so she placed it back in the small basket and drew the cloth over it. The cloth settled in a smooth fold. Mara returned the covered basket to the lower shelf beneath the work table. It rested in the cooler air there, its handle turned outward. The basket was back in its established place, with the third orange beneath the cloth. Mara stood beside the table and looked at the arrangement. 2 oranges rested in the bowl near the shaded lamp. The third remained covered beneath the work table. The difference was modest, but clear. Anyone checking the fruit later would see which pieces had reached the warmer stage and which one could wait. She unfolded the 2 wooden dividers from the crate and considered them. They were light, plain, and smooth along the edges. They could keep different stages apart when a larger amount of fruit was being held. Tonight, the single basket and the bowl already provided enough room. Mara placed the dividers on the clean cloth beside the paper. They could be useful another time without needing to be used now. Nothing in the note asked her to do more. Mara folded the paper along its existing crease. The cloth went beneath it, and the wooden dividers rested on top. She returned everything to the crate and lowered the lid. The latch closed with a small, ordinary click. Before pushing the crate back, she brushed a few pale flecks from the floor beneath the table. They might have come from the old wood or from a dried leaf. Mara gathered them into her palm and placed them in the small collection pail near the shelf. Then she slid the crate inward. Its front edge aligned with the work table leg. The faded blue stamp faced outward, and the lids sat flat beneath the table's broad wooden top. Mara opened her notebook and wrote, "Fruit checked by firmness and color." 2 oranges placed in the bowl, 1 remained covered. Guide returned to crate. She read the lines once. They said enough. The old note had not given her a new responsibility. It had shown her the ordinary reason for several small arrangements she had already seen. Some fruit waited in the cooler shade. Some fruit rested near the mild warmth of the lamp. Each piece had a place suited to what it was doing. Mara closed the notebook and set it square with the table's edge. At the far end, the bowl held 2 oranges, separate and firm. At the near end, the covered basket rested on its lower shelf with the third orange beneath the cloth. Beneath the work table, the old fruit crate sat closed in its shadow. Mara carried the small pail toward the established collection place for dry pieces. She emptied the pale flecks there and returned through the open space between the citrus tubs. The connecting path showed beyond the far doorway. Mara crossed only as far as the glass door. Cooler air touched her face. Along the path, the lamps stood at their familiar intervals, their reflections lying in pale bands across the boards. Beyond them, the fig house held its broad leaves in deeper green light. Nothing in the fig house called for her attention yet. Mara returned to the citrus house and left the door open by the same small measure. The warmer air gathered around her shoulders again, carrying the scent of peel, damp soil, and old wood. She looked once more beneath the work table. The old crate had returned to its place, evenly aligned with the table leg, its lid flat and its faded blue stamp turned toward the path. The covered basket remained on its lower shelf. At the far end, the two oranges rested beside the shaded lamp with room around them. Mara let her hands rest at her sides. The fruit had been sorted. The guide had been returned. The crate was back where it belonged, and the room had kept its calm arrangement. Rain continued above the glass, and the lamps held their gentle warmth over the leaves. Mara turned back toward the work table, where the next small piece of care could wait beneath the steady light. Mara left the citrus house, quiet around the bowl and the covered basket, ready for the ordinary work that would follow. The rain had softened by the time Mara lifted her eyes from the work table. The citrus house rested in warm green light. Water moved down the glass roof in thin, shining lines, and the lamps gave off their mild heat above the leaves. The air smelled of orange peel, damp soil, and old wood. Beside the shaded lamp, the white bowl with the green rim held two oranges. They rested apart from one another, firm and evenly colored. Beneath the table, the small basket sat on its lower shelf. The folded cloth lay across it, and the third orange remained covered beneath, its narrow green band still visible near the stem. Mara left the fruit where it was. The practical guide had been read and followed. The arrangement was settled. She turned toward a citrus tub near the middle of the house. During the first round, the plainly visible dry pieces had been cleared. During the later look, a thin side shoot had shown itself beneath the lower leaves. It was dry from base to tip, though partly hidden before. It was the last small pruning task left from those partial passes. Mara took the shears from their tray on the lower shelf. She held the living branch aside with one hand and supported the dry shoot with the other. Then she made one quiet cut. The shoot came away cleanly. She kept it in her palm and looked at the branch. The leaves remained where they had grown. The fruit above them had not shifted. A little space now opened beneath the lower leaves, allowing the warm lamp to reach the branch without changing the shape of the tree. Mara waited until the leaves had become still. Then she returned the shears to their tray, with the handles aligned beside its edge. She did not look for another cut. The work at that tub was finished, and the citrus pruning begun in the earlier rounds was complete. She carried the dry piece toward the connecting path. The route across the citrus house was clear beneath her shoes. Labels hung at readable heights. Baskets rested beneath the shelves, their handles turned outward. Cloths lay smoothly over the fruit. The entrance lamp cast a low circle across the tiles behind her, while the middle lamp gathered the work table into a softer glow. Mara noticed these things without stopping to adjust them. At the work table, she paused long enough to see the bowl again. Two oranges rested within the gentler edge of the light. The shaded lamp warmed the wood behind them without shining directly across the fruit. The covered basket remained below. The old fruit crate still rested against the same table leg, its faded blue stamp facing outward. Its lid was closed, and nothing had shifted inside. Mara continued toward the glass door. She opened it and stepped beneath the higher roof. The air changed gradually. The bright scent of citrus leaves thinned behind her, giving way to damp wood and the deeper green smell of fig branches. Rain moved along the panes in narrow trails. Lamps stood at familiar intervals, making soft pools across the dry path. Mara walked at an easy pace. The dry chute was light in her hand. She passed through the wider middle section, where the roof rose slightly and the rain sounded broader overhead. Beyond the glass, the garden had become a quiet pattern of dark branches and pale reflections. Nothing in the passage needed her attention. Broad leaves appeared beyond the doorway, layered in warm shadow. The nearest baskets rested beneath their shelves, and the pale labels faced the walkway. Mara entered the fig house and crossed to the established compost pail near the work area. She lifted the lid. The dry piece made a faint, papery sound as she placed it inside with the other trimmings. Then she closed the lid and set her hand briefly on its top. The pail remained where it belonged. That was all. Mara did not take the shears from the narrow shelf. She did not search the fig branches for more work. The small fig stem found during the later check had already been removed, and the broad leaves now held their natural shapes. The path through the room remained open. She stood for a moment between the shelves. The fig house received the rain more softly than the citrus house. Drops touched the roof and were gathered into a low, even murmur by the leaves. Warmth rested near the floor. Labels appeared between the branches, and baskets stayed quiet beneath them. One lamp cast a gentle circle across the nearest shelf. Another rested farther along the row, its glow reaching the lower stems and the tiles while leaving the fruit at a softer edge. The far lamp joined the others into one calm line. Mara turned back toward the connecting doorway. There was nothing to carry now. Her hands hung loosely at her sides. She crossed the fig house at the same easy pace, passing the labels and baskets without disturbing them. A broad leaf shifted above her shoulder. Mara slowed until it had settled, then continued. At the doorway, she looked back once. The fig leaves formed deep layers under the lamps. The compost pail stood closed near the work area. The baskets remained beneath the shelves, and the labels could be read from the path. The dry citrus shoot had joined the earlier trimmings. The pruning work from the first pass and the later partial check was complete. Mara stepped into the connecting path. Cooler air gathered around her shoulders. The lamps received her one at a time. Fig leaves softened behind her, and the scent of citrus returned ahead, first as green branches, then as peel, warm soil, and wood. Rain moved over both roofs. Mara crossed the wider middle section and listened to the small sound of her steps. Reflections trembled faintly on the boards whenever water passed over the glass, then became smooth again. She did not hurry. At the citrus doorway, the warmer air met her face. She entered and followed the tiled walkway toward the work table. The branches remained in their natural places. The final cut had left no loose piece among the leaves. The shears rested in their tray, and the lamps continued their quiet work above the rows. The labels were clear. The baskets were settled. The cloths lay flat. Nothing had changed except the one dry shoot, and that had already been carried to the compost pail. Beside the work table, the basket of spare labels waited with its wooden handle turned outward. The cards inside lay in a neat stack. Mara saw it and let it remain for the next ordinary task. At the table, she stopped beside the shaded lamp. The white bowl with the green rim held the two oranges just as before. Their skins caught a soft band of light, orange and smooth. Beneath the table, the covered basket remained on its lower shelf. The third orange stayed in its place beneath the cloth. Mara rested one hand on the table. The wood felt warm beneath her palm. A faint scent of fig leaves remained on her fingers, mingling with the clean fragrance of citrus. Rain moved quietly overhead, and the leaves held their soft shine. The night had narrowed to a few familiar things. The first pruning pass, the later check, one final citrus cut, one light piece carried across the path, and the return to the shaded lamp. Mara breathed in slowly. The floor was firm beneath her shoes. The table was steady beneath her hand. Beyond the far row, the connecting path showed its calm line toward the fig house. She looked once at the bowl. The oranges stayed together there, with room between them. She looked once at the covered basket. It remained beneath the table, quiet and undisturbed. Mara lowered her hand. The citrus house held its rows, labels, baskets, and gentle warmth. The fig house rested beyond the path, in deeper green shadow. Rain continued above the glass, and the lamps kept their small circles of light. There was no more pruning to add to this round. Mara stood beside the shaded lamp, calm and capable, while the finished work settled into its proper places. The label basket waited nearby. The bowl of oranges remained beside the shaded lamp, and the covered basket stayed beneath the table. The old crate still rested against the same table leg, closed and quiet, its faded blue stamp facing outward. Rain moved softly over the glass roofs, carrying the rooms toward the next simple task. The label basket rested beside the work table, its smooth wooden handle turned outward. Mara lifted the spare cards from inside it one at a time. She kept their corners aligned and placed the small stack on the clear part of the work table, beside the notebook, and well away from the shaded lamp. There they would remain until the basket returned. The basket itself was empty now, light in her hand and ready to carry. She left the white bowl with the green rim beside the shaded lamp and the covered basket beneath the table. 2 oranges rested in the bowl, firm and evenly colored. The third remained beneath the folded cloth. Mara did not touch them. Rain moved softly across the glass roof. The lamps warmed the leaves without making them bright, and the air held the clean scent of orange peel, damp soil, and old wood. Labels faced the walkway. Baskets rested beneath the shelves. The tiled path remained open between the tubs. At the farther doorway, Mara stepped beneath the higher glass. The air cooled around her shoulders. Damp wood replaced the strongest citrus scent, and rain slipped down the panes in long silver lines. The path lamps stood at their familiar intervals, their reflections stretching across the dry boards. Mara walked without hurry. For a few steps, the citrus leaves still gave off their green scent. Then the passage became quieter and cooler beneath the middle roof. Beyond the glass, the garden appeared as dark branches and pale, softened reflections. At the wider section, rain sounded a little broader overhead. Mara held the empty label basket at her side and continued through the calm pools of light. Nothing in the passage needed attention. The lamps were steady. The boards were dry. The garden remained beyond the panes, softened by weather and distance. The fig house waited at the far end. Broad leaves gathered the amber light along their edges. Beneath them, shelves and baskets rested in deeper green shadow. Mara crossed the threshold and placed the empty label basket on the bench near the entrance. The bench was cool beneath her fingertips. She entered the nearest row. The fig house received the rain differently. Drops reached the roof and leaves as a low, spread-out murmur. Warm air rested between the shelves. Pale labels appeared at familiar heights, and the baskets beneath them held their quiet shapes. Mara followed the open walkway. She let her eyes move over the room as a whole. Labels, baskets, leaves, lamps, and the clear path between them. The fig house had a slower appearance than the citrus house. Its broad branches made the room feel layered, while the small circles of light kept the walkway easy to follow. Near the middle row, one label had turned slightly toward the stem behind it. The writing was still visible, but the string had twisted around itself. Mara picked up the empty label basket and placed it beneath the branch. It would hold the card briefly and keep it clean while she reset the string. She lifted the label from its hook and set it in the basket. The basket remained steady on the floor. Mara loosened the string, turned the card toward the path, and worked the loop free from the small crossing fold. She tied it again with the same simple knot. The label hung at its familiar height, facing the walkway without pressing against the leaves. She took it from the basket and returned it to the branch. The card swung once, then it settled. Mara lifted the basket. It was empty again. She looked at the label from several steps away. The writing was clear. The branch held its natural shape. The space beneath the leaves remained open, and the basket below sat squarely beneath the shelf. The small correction had joined the rest of the room. Mara continued toward the far end of the fig house. The lamps gave off their familiar warmth. She felt it lightly across her hands as she passed. A broad leaf shifted above the walkway, leaned into the edge of the light, and returned to its place. Mara slowed until it had settled. Rain continued overhead. At the far lamp, she paused without touching the shade. Its light reached the lower leaves, the labels, and the woven baskets in a soft circle. The fruit remained in gentler shadow. The base stood clear of the walkway. Mara looked back along the row. The adjusted label faced the path. The other cards showed between the leaves. Baskets rested beneath their shelves. Handles turned outward. Nothing in the room had been rearranged beyond that one useful turn. She carried the empty label basket back to the entrance bench. For a moment, she placed it there and rested her hand on the handle. The basket had held the label while the card was taken down, checked, and returned. Nothing remained inside it. Nothing else needed carrying in the fig house. Mara picked it up and stepped into the connecting path. Cooler air gathered around her. Behind her, the fig house softened into layers of green leaves and amber light. Ahead, the citrus scent waited beyond the glass, faint at first, and then clearer with every step. The basket rested easily against her hip. She passed through one lamp circle, then another. Rain followed the roof frames overhead. Thin trails gathered on the panes and slipped downward, while the path remained quiet beneath her feet. At the central lamp, Mara slowed. The wider roof gave the rain more room to sound. Damp wood and wet leaves surrounded her. Behind her, the fig house held the repaired label and the quiet baskets. Ahead, the citrus house waited with its warmer air and lower lights. Mara breathed in slowly. Then she continued. Orange peel returned before the doorway came fully into view. Citrus leaves caught the lamps in small, soft patches. The tiled walkway showed a clear line from the glass door to the work table. Mara crossed into the citrus house. Warmth gathered around her hands. She carried the empty label basket to the work table and set it beside the notebook. The spare cards still waited in their definite place. On the clear wood beside it, their corners aligned and their pale faces turned upward. The old fruit crate rested against the same table leg, its faded blue stamp facing outward. The shaded lamp remained level above the wood. Mara gathered the cards from beside the notebook. She placed them inside the basket one at a time, keeping their corners aligned. She checked the bottom afterward, then rested her fingers lightly against the top card. The spare cards were back in the basket. Mara carried it to the lower shelf beneath the work table and set it there. It settled beside the folded cloth, with its handle turned outward and its cards held safely inside. She returned to the lamp. The white bowl with the green rim stood securely beside the light. 2 oranges rested inside, separate and firm. Beneath the table, the third orange remained covered in its smaller basket. Mara left the fruit undisturbed. She placed one hand on the work table. The wood was smooth and warm beneath her palm. Rain moved over the roof. Citrus leaves shifted lightly, then became still. Through the far doorway, the connecting path held its quiet line toward the fig house. The label had been returned to its branch. The spare cards had been removed from the basket and kept beside the notebook, while the basket completed its round. Now the cards were gathered inside it again. safely back beneath the work table. Nothing had been misplaced. Nothing needed to be carried farther. Mara lowered her hand. Her work was settled. The bowl belonged beside the shaded lamp. The covered orange remained in its cooler shadow. The old crate stayed against the table leg, closed and quiet, its faded blue stamp facing outward. She stood beside the work table while rain softened both roofs, and the warm lamps kept their steady circles over the leaves. The citrus house held its familiar rose. Beyond the glass, the fig house rested in deeper green shadow. The route between them was clear from one pool of light to the next. Mara breathed in the clean scent of orange peel and warm wood. The label basket waited beneath the table. The spare cards were gathered in their basket, with its handle turned outward. The bowl held 2 oranges. The third remained covered. The corrected label faced the walkway in the fig house, and the ordinary path between the rooms remained open. Nothing else needed carrying. Mara remained beside the shaded lamp, calm and capable, while the settled work rested in its proper places. Mara kept one hand on the work table and let the quiet gather around her. Beside the shaded lamp, the white bowl with the green rim held 2 firm, evenly colored oranges. Beneath the table, the small basket rested on its lower shelf beneath the folded cloth, with the third orange covered inside it. Beside that basket, the basket of unused labels waited with its wooden handle turned outward and its cards held in a neat stack. The old fruit crate leaned against the same table leg, its faded blue stamp facing the path. Rain moved softly across the glass roof. It passed over the citrus leaves, followed the frames above the connecting path, and reached the fig house as a broad, even murmur. Warm air rested close to the table. It smelled of damp soil, clean peel, green leaves, and smooth wood. Mara opened her notebook and recorded the work before her. She wrote that the spare labels had been returned, the fruit had been settled, the lamps had been checked, the pruning was finished, and the corrected label faced the path. She read the lines once. Then she added one more, both houses settled. Mara closed the notebook and placed it beside the bowl. The shaded lamp stood level above the wood, sending its mild warmth toward the nearby leaves. The 2 oranges rested safely in the gentler edge of the light, well in from the table's edge. Below, the covered basket remained in the cooler air beneath the work table. The unused labels waited beside it, gathered and ready for another ordinary round. Mara did not lift the cloth. She did not move the bowl or touch the fruit. The practical guide had done what it needed to do. 2 oranges belonged together in the shaded bowl. The third remained covered beneath the table. The labels were in their basket again, and the old fruit crate was closed in its place. Nothing more was required of them tonight. She turned toward the citrus rows. The house looked different now that the work had finished. Earlier, each label, basket, branch, and lamp had called for a small piece of attention. Now they formed one quiet pattern. Pale cards hung between the leaves, baskets rested beneath the shelves. The lamps joined one warm circle to the next. Mara walked slowly along the open path. The labels were visible. The baskets sat squarely beneath the shelves. The branches held their natural shapes, and the small, dry pieces from pruning were no longer among the living growth. At the first lamp, she paused. Its shade was level, its base clear of the tiles, and its cord followed the wall without crossing the walkway. Mara touched the metal cover with the back of one finger. It was comfortably warm. She took her hand away. The lamp kept its quiet circle over the leaves. At the next row, the label she had corrected faced the path. Its writing could be read without stepping closer. The string rested in its plain knot, and the leaves around it remained where they had grown. Behind her, the middle lamp gathered the work table into a softer glow. From a distance, the bowl appeared as a pale shape beside the amber light. The 2 oranges showed as quiet bands of color. Beneath the table, the covered basket, and the basket of unused labels remained in their separate places. Mara continued toward the farther doorway. The citrus house held a gentle sequence. Warm wood near the table, green leaves along the shelves, tiled floor beneath the lamps, and the clear line of the connecting path beyond the glass. Rain shone briefly on the roof, then slipped down the frames toward the garden. She opened the door. Cooler air touched her face. Mara stepped onto the connecting path and let the door rest behind her. The passage was dry and clear. Lamps stood beneath the higher glass at familiar intervals, each making a soft pool across the boards. Their reflections stretched and softened whenever rain moved along the panes. She walked through the first pool of light, then the next. The citrus scent remained with her for a little while, bright beneath the quieter smell of damp wood. Gradually, the air changed. Green fig leaves waited ahead, broad and dark beneath the rain. The path carried the warmth of one house behind her and the deeper shade of the other in front. At the wider middle section, the roof rose slightly, and the rain spread into a fuller murmur overhead. Beyond the glass, the garden had become a soft pattern of branches and reflections. Mara stopped beneath the central lamp. Its light rested across the boards and reached a narrow strip of the panes beside her. Water gathered along the frame, joined itself into thin lines, and slipped downward. The crossing remained open in both directions. Mara breathed in slowly. The air held damp wood, rain, citrus peel, and the faint green scent of figs. She breathed out and continued toward the far door. The fig house received her in deeper green shadow. Broad leaves rose above the shelves and caught the lamplight along their edges. Beneath them, the baskets and labels appeared in quiet pieces. The room was not dark. It simply held its warmth more closely than the citrus house. Mara crossed to the nearest lamp. Its shade faced the shelf. The light reached the lower stems and the soil without shining directly across the fruit. The basket below stood clear of the base, and the walkway beside it remained open. A broad leaf curved near the edge of the light. Its surface shone softly where the warmth touched it. Mara watched it for a moment, then let her gaze move on. Nothing required her hand. She followed the center path through the fig rows. The first label stood straight in its holder. The basket beneath it rested inward from the front edge of the shelf. At the next row, another card faced the walkway, its pale surface easy to read between two broad leaves. Mara did not stop at every shelf. She saw the room as a whole. The labels were visible. The baskets were steady. The cloths lay flat where they covered the fruit. The lamps warmed the lower leaves without glare. The branches remained within their established shapes, leaving the path open. At the middle shelf, the corrected label still hung at its familiar height. Its string remained clear of the stem. The card faced the path, and the branch beside it held its natural line. Mara slowed as she passed. The writing was clear. She continued toward the far lamp. Its warmth touched her hands as she entered its circle. Mara checked the metal cover lightly. It held the same comfortable heat as the lamps in the citrus house. She lowered her hand. The lamp stayed level. Its light rested across the edge of the shelf and the lower leaves. A basket sat beneath it on the wood, square and quiet. Rain moved above the fig house. The broad leaves softened the sound into a low murmur that seemed to come from the whole roof at once. Every so often, one leaf shifted in the warm air. It moved slightly, then became still again. Mara stood in the middle of the room and listened. The fig house had its own settled rhythm. The rain was wider here. The air was cooler beneath the leaves. The lamps were close to the floor, and the shelves made quiet horizontal lines through the green. She opened her notebook and read the lines she had written in the citrus house. Then she added one more. Fig house steady. She closed the notebook and turned toward the entrance. The return through the fig house was brief and unhurried. She passed the shelves, labels, and baskets with the calm recognition that came from seeing them already settled. The path widened between two tubs, and she followed the clear space toward the doorway. She stepped onto the connecting path. Cooler air gathered around her shoulders. Fig leaves softened into shadow behind the glass. Ahead, the lamps showed a calm line toward the citrus house. Mara walked through the pools of light one at a time. Rain traced the panes overhead. Reflections lay across the boards, pale and wavering. The path remained dry beneath her feet. She did not pause this time. The scent of citrus returned gradually, first as green leaves, then as warm wood and clean peel. Through the glass door, the citrus rose waited in gentle light. Mara entered the house and followed the path directly to the work table. The labels and baskets remained in place. The branches held their natural shapes. The lamps continued to glow softly above the rows. The basket of unused labels rested on the lower shelf beneath the work table. Its handle turned outward. The old fruit crate remained against the table leg, closed and quiet. At the table, Mara looked down. The white bowl with the green rim stood beside the shaded lamp. 2 oranges rested inside it, separate and firm. Beneath the table, the small basket remained on its lower shelf. The folded cloth lay across it, and the third orange stayed covered beneath the cloth. Mara rested one hand on the table. The wood was smooth and warm. Rain moved across the roof in long, patient strokes. Beyond the last citrus row, the connecting path led toward the fig house, where the broad leaves rested beneath their lamps. She let her shoulders lower. The labels faced the walkway. The baskets rested beneath the shelves. The lamps were warm. The paths were clear. The fruit had been sorted and left in its proper places. Mara closed the notebook and left it beside the bowl. The white bowl with the green rim stood beside the shaded lamp, holding 2 oranges. The third orange stayed covered in its basket beneath the table. Mara lowered her hand. The work was settled. The lamps continued their gentle circles through both houses, and Mara remained calm and ready for the next ordinary round.